Hi, everybody. Welcome. I see people trickling in. It's nice to have everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome, welcome.
And let's see. And it's 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm just making sure I have everything in front of me that I need. So for anybody who hasn't met us just yet, I'm Shaelene and this is Kathryn. We are DBT therapists, trainers, practice owners, the whole nine. And this is the last in a series of free trainings for clinicians on just different things about doing DBT as a therapy modality. And today we're talking all things certification. So with that being said, I'll have Kathryn start us off. We're going to talk and teach to a couple of different things. And then towards the end, when we wind down, we will leave room for questions. So you can type them throughout during the chat if they come up, and Kathryn and I will do our best to filter them and make sure that we get to them. And if not, like I said, when we get towards the end, we'll make sure we leave a little bit of time for that. So with all of that being said, let's go to Kathryn.
Yeah. So I'm going to start us off today with trying to answer a bunch of questions because I think in our position, Shaelene and I often get lots of questions asked to us about certification, how to get certified, what kind of certification to get, all of those kinds of things. So I'm guessing that most of you in attendance might have your own questions about this. And as Shaelene said, go ahead and type those in. But I'm going to start out with a series of kind of clarifications that I think are a good place for us to start the conversation. So the first thing is people talk a lot. I mean, I'm sure if you're on any sort of social media related to DBT or even just in your workplace, you've probably heard people refer to DBT certification. And there's some sort of an unfortunate thing in that for the most part, people hear it and talk about it as if there's sort of one single certification that exists. And so whenever people, use the term certification, that they're talking about the same thing. But what's unfortunate about that is it's just not true. There's lots of different bodies that certify people in different ways, and they all mean different things. And so I just want to start out with that clarification because I want all of us, as we're all, here having this conversation, to be thinking in terms of what certification represents, and that's going to depend on what body is certifying you. And there's a lot of different bodies out there, and I don't have an exhaustive list of those. But if you go on and Google DBT certification, you'll find some different options, and they range in what they represent from, for some bodies, it's simply attending a training. And then, of course, the Linehan Board Certification, which is where both Shaelene and I are certified, the requirements for certification are pretty extensive. And so there's a wide range of what it could mean. So my first thing that I want everybody to leave this webinar with today is just for a lot of clarity around the fact that when we talk about certification, we still have to use our observe and describe skills, just like in all other things DBT related, which is simply to notice, like when somebody's talking about a certification, what does it actually mean and what were the requirements that were needed to, to be met in order to achieve that level of certification. We will talk today in this webinar very specifically about the Linehan Board Certification and what the requirements are for that and how you might, if you're interested in pursuing that, how you might go about it and what the path looks like. We won't do that for all certifications because we are only certified in this one through this body, and so that's what we know best. But I do think it's a good question to be aware of when people in your workplace or other professionals you come across are talking about either getting certified or being certified, to know what body they're certified in, so you understand a little bit more of what that represents. So I think that's where I wanted to start the conversation. I mean, there's a few other terms that I know get kind of thrown around in the conversation about
DBT lingo.
DBT and what's that?
Like just DBT lingo. It gets thrown around a lot, and it can be intimidating and very confusing for people. So we figured it was worthwhile just to throw some terms out there and kind of describe really like clarify what that means.
So one of those is people often, actually the first thing is not specifically a term, but people have the question many times whether or not you have to be certified in order to do DBT. And this is a great question to start with because certainly the answer is no. Lots of people do DBT who are not certified through any body, and certainly not through any one specific body. And and I would suggest that even to learn DBT, you have to do DBT, and to get certified, at least through the Linehan Board, as we've talked about, you really have to do DBT, and you have to be doing it for an established amount of time, so you have some experience under your belt. And so you don't have to be certified to jump in and get started and learn and begin doing it. The difference, however, is that you do need some training. I mean, I think oftentimes, it's a very rare occasion where I think somebody reads the manual and is able to go out and do it without any sort of more like didactic training or even experiential training. And so I would say, if you are interested in getting into DBT in your practice in some way, getting trained is just a really good idea. At the very least, making sure you're doing a lot of studying and learning about the treatment and getting ready for it. But you don't have to be certified to be a DBT clinician. And there's lots of great clinicians out there who have been maybe on the fence here and there for various reasons. And we'll talk a little bit about that later in the webinar today, why people might wait, or why, for Shaelene and I, why we went ahead and jumped right in and went for certification.
Yeah, and this is not unique to DBT either. I mean, there are other therapies, again, that I wouldn't really speak to because I'm not trained or certified in those types of therapies. I know EMDR is one where there are certifications and specific trainings and steps, for one certification versus another. And just like Kathryn said, just because someone isn't certified in something, at least in this context, it doesn't mean that they're not doing the therapy the way that it was written and prescribed. And it doesn't mean that they're not doing it well. It just means that they didn't go through the certification process. So, while there are different pros and cons that are associated with going through a certification process, I also don't want people thinking that just because someone's not certified doesn't mean that doesn't automatically equate to them not being qualified either. I think our examples are a great example. Kathryn helped me to get certified before she was certified. She was doing great DBT, so much so that she helped me to get certified, and then she did her certification after. So it's not as if once either of us got certified, that was the moment that we were born DBT therapists and started doing DBT better solely because of the certification. So I think that's an important distinction to make too, is that it's a choice that you can make, and you don't have to have it to be doing the work. But like Kathryn says, is just like anything we would be doing as therapists, we need to be able to back up that we can do the work by making sure that our training is adequate and sufficient, and that we feel confident in the service that we're providing.
And that, in that, or from that perspective, certification really is just sort of like, it's a certificate, right? That witnesses or gives witness to something that you've done, some way that you've shown your work, or you've shown in some cases that you've attended a training, or that you've actually, submitted some sort of proof of your clinical skills in some way. So, certification, again, just to be clear, is not a magic pill that makes you a good DBT therapist or anything like that. And you certainly wouldn't want to treat someone, just because they have a certification doesn't mean, that they're sort of like infallible. In fact, in DBT, one of our assumptions on our consultation teams is that, of course, we're fallible. And we all have to be sort of held to some sort of accountability for how we are behaving, and be willing to receive feedback and all of that. So this is, certification does not mean anything about, whether or not somebody is doing a good job. What it does mean is that they've met some requirements, but depending on what the certifying body has laid out. So another term I want to talk about is adherence. People often use terms like adherence or full fidelity DBT. And there are some specifics that we can talk about with this, and then there's some general things. So people use this term adherent all the time, not always using it accurately or appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Linehan Board of Certification, one of the requirements, and Shaelene will go through all of them in a little bit here, but one of those requirements is that you do submit tapes of your sessions, and those tapes get coded using adherence coding measure, right? So they're looking at your session and they're coding all of the strategies that are showing up in the session and rating it based on a very specific adherence coding measure, which is not publicly available. So as you're preparing for certification, you don't have access to that. Although I will say when you read Linehan's text, there's all kinds of like, what is DBT and what's not DBT checklists in each of the chapter. And those will cover, the spectrum of the things that need to show up in a session. And so when people talk about adherence, what they're talking about is some, depending on where they're at and how they're coding their sessions, it's some version of, does this session stand up to what's expected in DBT? And while the adherence measure that's used for rating sessions for certification isn't publicly available, there are lots of versions of it that have a lot of similarities and will, most likely measure up pretty close. Some of those are publicly available. Alan Frazzetti has one. You can get that on the DBT wiki, which Shaelene, I don't know if you can pop the link to that into the chat. But those, there's lots of ways to assess your sessions to see, am I doing DBT? I would say the probably most straightforward, although kind of complicated way to do this would be just to get all of those, what is DBT and what's not DBT lists out of Linehan's book, and you can just assess your own sessions. And all the other adherence, coding forms that exist or are floating around here and there are some version of kind of pared down lists like what's in the text. So when we talk about adherence, there's the formal term of it, like it would pass that adherence coding measure. And then there's also the ways in which people use it sort of colloquially. I think in a lot of our settings, we talk about adherence DBT, and what people often really mean when they're using that term is more that they're offering comprehensive DBT. So I'll define that next. So comprehensive DBT means that you are providing all of the 5 sort of functional components of a DBT program. This involves individual therapy sessions that are, that again would meet that sort of standard of DBT sessions based on those lists from Linehan's text, skills training, phone coaching, environmental interventions, and consultation team. So comprehensive DBT involves all 5 of those components to some, in varying ways. So oftentimes when people talk about having like an adherent program, what I think they often mean is that they're offering all of the components of a DBT program to the best of their ability. And they're meeting.
I think people also just refer to comprehensive as full, like they're looking for the full package of DBT. Does this therapist or does this practice offer full DBT, aka comprehensive DBT, meaning do they have all of the parts that are needed to hold up the table? Or are they offering a version of DBT that's more informed, which generally means that they're offering a piece of that treatment, but not all of the legs that support the table. And so when I think of adherence, very simply, I think is DBT being performed in the way that it's prescribed. So when we look at, and if somebody's referring somebody, so if somebody says, my psychiatrist referred me for DBT because they said it's going to help with my suicidal thinking, or my suicidal behaviors or my hospitalizations, they are probably in a very general sense referencing all of the research that indicates that DBT done comprehensively, the full version of it, performed adherently as it's prescribed, is going to lead to those results. And so it's important to understand these things because sometimes we don't always know what people are really asking for. Sometimes they don't really know what they're asking for, clients as well. Sometimes maybe they got a part of the treatment, but they didn't get the whole treatment. And that might be part of why the person had the results that they had. So being able to understand what the terms mean, but also helping other people to understand the terms really goes a long way for those reasons.
Yeah, I think even like providing education to clients and families of clients is helpful too, because oftentimes if they really need DBT and they've gotten bits and pieces, but they haven't had the whole thing, and maybe it hasn't been as effective as they had hoped it would be, it can be pretty demoralizing when it's not getting better. And then people are saying, well, you need DBT, and they think, well, I've already had it.
I've
And
got it.
maybe
I
they've
did
had
it.
parts
Yeah.
that haven't. Yeah. Now, all of that is to say, that comprehensive DBT, that term is meaningful, and there's a context for that, and hopefully you're getting a better sense of that. And if you are still unclear, we're happy to answer some questions towards the end, but this is also part of when I say, getting trained, whether or not you get certified, this is all part of that basic level of training, is understanding what a DBT program looks like and what all the components of it need to be. And how they are meant to function and all of that. What it's not to say, all of that is that being said, I also want to point out that DBT informed, which is a term people often use when they talk about offering some aspect of DBT, or maybe in their individual therapy having sort of DBT perspectives or teaching some DBT skills while they're not offering all of that, all of the components of a full program. It's not to say that this is wrong. I mean, there's lots of clients out there who don't need a comprehensive DBT program, and they may not be at a level where they're going to need like long-term DBT treatment, or I shouldn't say long-term, but as long of a duration or something like that. And they may benefit from some of the skills or some of the perspectives of DBT. And so there's this term, people use DBT informed, and I just want to point out that, it's neither good nor bad. It's sort of one of those terms that, of course, is going to show up, because there's just no way that people could know a little bit about DBT and not use some of it here and there and have it kind of woven into other kinds of treatments. It's natural that it would occur. And I just think it's also important for people to understand what they mean when they say it, and be clear with clients and make sure clients understand what it means. Specifically for those populations, again, where they might really benefit or need a comprehensive program. And we want to make sure that they're clear when they're getting that and when they're not getting that. So we're not sort of kind of overstepping what expectations we could have out of that program. So are there any terms I didn't catch there, Shaelene, that you wanted me to?
We talked about DBT informed. We talked about, do we have to be certified to provide comprehensive? No. Will I be certified if I attend a training?
Yeah, so this is a good question, because I think oftentimes when people are looking for looking for trainings, that's a question. Like, I mean, I know myself, if I wanted to go out and do a new treatment or learn a new treatment, like that would be one of my first questions, is like, how do I get certified? What does it look like? And again, because it's not one single board that offers certification, it's a different answer depending what body is certifying. And there are certainly some trainings that exist that will offer a version of like a DBT certification simply for attending the training. Other trainings won't. And some, and like for the Linehan Board of Certification, which we'll talk about the requirements there, training is part of it, but it is not, you don't get certified through the training. So you have to attend a certain level of training in order to qualify, but that training in and of itself doesn't lead to certification. I think that's, I don't know if I could say this super confidently. I think it's fairly standard that usually it's more than just a training that is required for different kinds of certifications. Although I know that's not always the case. So
yeah, I mean, I think it always depends. And again, like Kathryn's saying, the more important part is understanding it. And if you don't know, just ask questions or do your research in it. So, before you make the decision to pursue certification, you want to know all of the different parts and pieces that are going to be involved in that. Is it going to be, you attend the training and then you leave with a certificate or certification, or is it going to require more than that? Just like anything else with your career, you want to make a very well-informed decision, and you want to know, what the costs and the gains are going to be and all of that. I know for myself, when I went through certification, it ended up being a lot different than I thought it would, a lot different than I thought it was going to be. And, I know looking back on it, I wouldn't have changed it. It's what I wanted, and that's what I was sure of throughout, but it was definitely a lot more challenging than I thought it was going to be. And so for anyone who's taking the decision on, and again, Kathryn and I are speaking to Linehan Board Certification because that's a certification that both of us hold. We also don't work or volunteer for the Board of Certification. We're not affiliated with them other than holding the certification. But like I said, we're doing this because in the past couple of months, specifically with gearing up to offer DBT training of our own, I've been getting lots of questions on social media or through email. And these are the questions that would come up. So I wanted to ensure that we just took time to answer them. But we don't work for the Linehan board. We're not affiliated with them other than having this certification. So I think you hit everything. Should we talk a little bit about Linehan board certification, Kathryn?
Yeah. Let's go there.
So, so for anybody who is here and they read my email of a story that came through, I'll tell you guys just a little bit about it if you haven't heard it already. Like a month or two ago, I had a family member visit and I wanted to go for a walk with her through my town. We have a lot of lakes where I live and it's just really pretty. And there's this one section of town that has very old log cabin style houses. And a long time ago, I don't know that she actually meant it, but she was like, I would love to live in a log cabin someday. And so I was like, she's going to love this. She lives in Texas. There's no cabins where she lives. She's going to think it's great. So we go out for a walk and she starts kind of like straggling behind me. And she's a very athletic person. So I'm just like, come on, Julie, keep it up. Let's go. Come on. And then somewhere in the walk, she's like, Shaelene, like, how much longer are we going to be walking for? And I'm like, it's no big deal. We're there. It's beautiful. You know, what's the big problem? And she's like, I did not wear the right shoes for this. I thought we were just going out for like a stroll, but I had took her out on a 3-mile walk at a pretty good pace without really telling her that. I just said, oh, we're going to go for a walk. So she didn't think to change her clothes or put on better sneakers, and she's starting to get blisters on her feet. So I felt pretty bad about it. And at the end of it, she was like, she's joking with me, but she said, I cannot believe you took me on that death march. And I was just like, oh my gosh, completely forgot to tell this woman, hey, here's what's in store on the walk. And when I thought about my process and certification, that's really what it was. Like I had signed up for what I thought was going to be this very casual stroll. And as I got into it, I realized it was actually much more difficult than that. So I've been in private practice. I own a group practice now, and it's been quite a few years since I started pursuing certification. I think I started pursuing it in 2015. And at that time, I was like the DBT person. I used to work for an agency and, I was like the lead team member there, and I would consult to other programs within our bigger system. And so surely when I was going to go get certified, I was going to be able to just do it and it was not going to be a problem. And that wasn't the case. Each step of the way, I really struggled. I struggled with the knowledge portion. There's an exam that's involved, and I'll go through all of these in a bit more detail. There's a knowledge portion involved. There's a case conceptualization part that was involved. And they took multiple attempts for me to be able to get through, not only multiple attempts, but a lot more training and supervision. When I had met Kathryn through some trainings that I had done a while back, but I had reached out to her and said, listen, like, I'm going through certification and turns out it's really challenging. Do you think you can help me get through this? And she did. And what ended up helping me get there was to really spend a lot of time refining my skills as a DBT therapist. It came from a lot of recording sessions every week, watching them all, learning how to code them, and then learning how to refine the different skills and strategies that are required in DBT to do it well. And so in reflection, it took way more work than I thought it was going to when I first set out. And I think, again, this is one of the reasons why it's important to do your research and know what's it going to take in order to do this. Now, that all being said, it made it that much better when I finished because I was moving into a space where I was opening up a practice that specialized in DBT. And for me, it just was not going to be, it wasn't going to be a thing. I wasn't going to open a DBT practice and not get certified in it. Like I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what I was doing and that I was doing the therapy that I wanted to do really well, because my clients all deserve that. And I want to make sure that all of the staff I have are following in the same footsteps. So it was worth it. And once I got to the top, I mean, I was pumped. And that is still one of I hang it up. I have my certification on my wall with my degrees. And that is the toughest one that I have up there. Like not my master's degree. It was my Linehan Board Certification. So it is a challenging process, but it's definitely worth it. I can talk a little bit about the path to getting certified, and I have a little graphic to show you all. I'm gonna try and get it in the chat, but last time I tried this, I didn't know if it was gonna work. Let's see here. So this is, I put it in the chat and I will share my screen. This was a graphic made by another wonderful DBT Linehan Board Certified therapist, Katie May. Her and myself did a training for group practice owners. And this is where this handout came from. So again, thinking about Linehan Board Certification specifically, there are a lot of requirements you have to meet before even being qualified to apply. One of them is completing a formal mindfulness training. They are not super specific. I mean, do you agree, Kathryn? It's not super specific about the, how long it has to be or anything, but there needs to be some sort of proof, a certificate or a certification that you have completed a mindfulness training, something to document that you have done something that's formal in terms of increasing your mindfulness practice, and also acknowledging that you have a regular practice of mindfulness. For myself, I'm a yoga teacher, and my yoga teacher training counted as the portion of the mindfulness component for me. As Kathryn mentioned earlier, in order to do the therapy, you have to read the book. Reading the book has all of the parts of the therapy. And like Kathryn said, it'll tell you what is DBT and it'll tell you what isn't DBT. Getting a letter of recommendation from your team lead. So this is, again, assuming that you're providing comprehensive DBT and you are connected to a team. I think another question that comes up a lot is, if I'm in private practice, can I get certified? Can I do comprehensive DBT? The answer is yes to both. A team only requires 2 people. So if you are meeting with someone virtually for your team, that's fine, as long as you guys are sticking to the structure and you guys are hitting the functions of what team serves. We'll talk more about that for anyone who's coming to our full training. We could talk a lot about team, but for now, that's what it is. You have to have had treatment and done DBT with at least 3 clients that you've gotten through the first stage of treatment. And the first stage of treatment goals are really safety and stabilization. You want to help clients obtain behavioral control over what their targets are. And even before, so this is like the way that the form is set up, it might seem a little out of order, but you have to have 40 hours of didactic training. So like Kathryn was saying, in addition to reading the book, Linehan Board Certification wants to know that you've had at least 40 hours of training in DBT. It doesn't have to be with a specific training body or agency, but it does have to be specific to DBT. And then with all of that, you still have to have participated in a team for a certain amount of time. When all of that is met, then you can apply. You also have to be independently licensed. I applied when the certification first came out in 2014, and I wasn't fully licensed yet, so I had to wait until that came in. But once you have all of that, you can send in your application. If you get approved at that point, then you get approved to take your exam. And the exam is all questions related to DBT treatment. There's questions about individual therapy. There's questions about skills group. There's no mock test out there. You don't really know, I know when I was studying for the exam, I asked people how I should prepare, and they said, just read the book again, like keep reading it, read all of the charts. So there's not really a study guide or anything. You kind of just have to know what you're doing, and it's pass or fail. It's multiple choice. And if you fail it, you get a chance to take it again within a certain amount of months. And that's the same at every level of the certification. So let's say you let's say you pass the exam, but you don't pass your tapes on the first time. You have a certain amount of time before you can go and then submit your tapes. So you pass the exam, and then after that, and they've actually changed it. Kathryn, I don't know if you know why they changed it, but before it was a little bit more challenging. You had to take the exam, you had to submit case conceptualizations, you had to pass that part, and then you would send in your tapes. And when you send your tapes in, like Kathryn said before, they're using a measure to code your tape. So they're using a scale of some kind to say, they hit this strategy, they did this, they did this, they did this, in order to say, yes, this is DBT, this looks effective, they're doing the therapy as we've prescribed it. And your tapes have to pass. And at that point, if the tapes pass and all of the other criteria has been met, then you become certified. So not only is the process quite rigorous, or it's a challenging one. Like I said, it's not a walk in the park. It's a definite hike. But it's also time consuming. So there's a lot that goes into all of this stuff. There isn't a just show up and get certified, because right out of the gate, you have to have done mindfulness training. You have to have 40 hours of DBT training. You have to get a letter of recommendation. So there are all of these components that come together. But I think, again, on the other side, because of that, the pool of people who have made it to the top can be a pool that's a bit smaller. I know for myself in New Jersey, there are less than 10 people who hold this certification. Kathryn was just telling me she's one of 2 people in her state in Colorado that hold the certification. So if you are considering this and you're wondering, like, how will this help me, not just from a clinical standpoint, and I'll talk more about that, but from a business standpoint of running a practice, or if you want to seem more competitive in terms of getting contracted with an insurance company, or maybe even advocating for improved rates, go on the Linehan Board Certification site and look for clinicians in your state and see how many people hold the certification. You might see that it would be, you would be a part of a very small group at the top of the mountain should you decide to climb it. Kathryn, what would you add?
I would add, I think a couple things. I feel like, as you said, like it's a hike versus a walk in the woods, but it is definitely well worth it. And my experience of it is that in the end, even though at times like you end up in the process having to learn more than you thought you knew, or you think you kind of know all the things that you need to know, and then you have to learn more. Or in my case, from some of my experiences, and I know you have the same experience, Shaelene, of having to kind of unlearn some things that I had picked up along the way and thinking, oh, this is DBT, and then realizing later, like, oh, I actually need to clarify because there's some things that I had assumed were true about DBT and they weren't. And all of that is challenging in the moment. Like it can be kind of like, oh man, it's like the more you learn, the more you realize how much you need to learn and all of that. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I feel like my sense of competence and confidence and like, and my own internal sense of mastery that's like carried me through my career has been substantially enhanced. Like it's like yes. So much more sense of not just like, knowing what I'm doing, but actually feeling like a little bit more freedom in my work with clients, because I do understand on a principle level so many things that that I maybe didn't understand before, or hadn't been kind of through the ringer to really learn in a experiential way. And this path, while it was challenging, was really well worth it for that. Just like feeling more free in my career and having less of the sort of stress that comes with burnout and things like that. That not that, getting certified means you don't get burned out, for sure. But through the process of certification, you learn how to apply all of these things in your own practice to yourself. You understand the principles of the treatment so much better, and you learn the things that you need to sort of take care of yourself and practice in a way that's like more more free and more confident.
And there was a study recently done, I believe it was a Frusetti study, shared it in a recent training, where they got information from a bunch of DBT therapists and found that the more expert level you became, the more adherent you were, the less burnt out you are, which makes so much sense to me, right? Because when I think about, especially if I watch my tapes from when I first started the certification process, certification pushed me in the direction to start taping myself. And it was something that I had just never done before then. So the process of watching my tapes and getting supervision on my tapes and learning how to code them and all of those other things was directly related to how much stronger I was of a DBT therapist, right? So when I watch those earlier tapes, I'm just like, oh, Shaelene, you cute little cherub there, trying so hard to do DBT and just missing the mark left and right. And when I look at myself in those sessions, I know that I don't feel confident. I know that I was really struggling with the client. And I know that my burnout was a lot higher. And so to know the practice so well that you are doing it in a way that it's almost as if all of the hard work leads it to being so much easier in your everyday life and with your sessions, because it just starts to come way more naturally, because at that point you've really overlearned it. not only that, but you continue to, once you start to have the, you start to reap the benefits of that, and you're like, oh, wow, I am getting better. My tapes are starting to shape up. I'm getting closer to being certified. That serves as the motivation to just keep wanting to do that, keep learning, keep taping, keep training in order to continue to have your skills grow at that level that feels like you're more of an expert in what you're doing. And so it makes so much sense that burnout in therapists who are providing more adherent therapy, and this was specific to DBT, I would imagine it would replicate, but I can't speak to that, that the better that you are at the treatment, the less burnt out you feel, and your clients are doing a lot better. So they also had research to show that suicide attempts post-treatment were lower, dramatically lower than anyone who was seeing the therapist who was not rating as high on that scale. So I mean, for that in itself, like if you want to be certified for all of the glory and, you know, all of the praise, that's wonderful. But I feel like a bigger reason is just knowing that you're going to feel so much better at what you're doing because your clients are going to get better. And, you know, this is why most of us have gotten into this field, right? Is like, we want to help people to get better. And so the goal of certification isn't, we're going to make you a better therapist. It's, we want to see what you can do. And then we'll say that we can put our stamp of approval on this. But what comes of it as a byproduct is certainly becoming stronger in this skill and in this trade of doing DBT. And that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, I would say, just as a personal story for in support specifically of DBT LBC certification, the Linehan Board Certification, is that because there's so many different things that you have to do, it pushes you to learn the treatment inside out.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't have kind of cursory knowledge of it. You really do have to dive in pretty deep and really start to learn not just the protocols, but the principles that guide those protocols. And you start to embody those and understand them from the inside in a way that I think, you know, when I talked about feeling more free in my career, so much of that is because of understanding principles and being able to see how those apply in all different situations in a way that's certainly, you know, adherent to protocols, but isn't constrained in the same way that oftentimes I think when you just learn protocols and you don't understand principles, you can feel really constrained by them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few questions that I want to attend to from the chat box. So one, first of all, Shaelene, you shared that on the screen, but the link didn't come through on the chat.
I put it in again. Can you guys see that? I just put it in again. It says it went through, but I don't know if it did.
I am not seeing it myself, so I'm guessing.
Oh, wait. Okay. I think I know why.
But while you're doing that, I'm going to answer some of these others. So one question was about, let's see, where do you, or who would you get a letter of recommendation from if you're the team leader? I know on the Linehan Board Certification site, it'll give you instructions for that, but I was team leader at the time I got certified, and I think I got mine from a previous supervisor that had, you know, observed tapes. So you could certainly get from a supervisor or consultant or someone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another question is, how many hours of training do we offer? So Shaelene referenced, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, we do have a training coming up if you are interested in getting trained in DBT. It's the training itself will offer 32 CEs, but the full training with all of the pre-recorded parts will meet the criteria of 40 hours. So there will be some portions that are not live, but you'll have to do like an attestation kind of thing, like a brief learning survey that you attended all of the pre-recorded parts, and you will get a document that certifies that you did complete the 40 hours of training. So if you are interested in pursuing Linehan Board of Certification, or the Linehan Board Certification, if you're pursuing that, this training would meet the criteria
for it, right?
And then there was a question about, somebody put in about having read somewhere that a team requires at least 3 people, and Shaelene, you just mentioned 2. I actually don't know of, do you know where that comes from, Shaelene, the 2?
I don't. I would just say, you know, the important thing to consider all of the time in DBT is the principles. So I think that a lot of times in DBT, and this is an unfortunate side, that there's so many words, there's so many terms, there's so many strategies that sometimes people can kind of like grasp onto those, but then forget the principles that drive them. And so that's not being principally driven is actually not DBT. So I'm thinking of a scenario where, you know, there's just not 3 people available to make a team. It would be great if there was, for that reason. If a dialectical tension arose, there'd be another person involved, sure. But that also doesn't mean that that a team of 2 people wouldn't meet the requirement of a team, because if it's hitting the principles of team, then there's no reason why that shouldn't count. To my knowledge, in DBT, in the Linehan Board Certification, there isn't a requirement to how many are on your team. They just want to know that you're participating on one. But I haven't heard that before, and I'm just imagining that might be why, that there's pros to having 3, and so therefore maybe somebody said like there has to be 3. I'm not aware of that, and what I would tell people is don't avoid being on a team just because you don't have a 3rd person. If there's 2 of you, then that's great. Start meeting. And I did that for a long time before I was a part of a bigger practice, because that was all I had.
And I would also just put out that you can, if you are on a team or you want to get on a team and are looking for someone, you reach out to us, because there's a listserv for people who have at least a foundational level of training in DBT, that people are looking for teams all the time. And there's a lot, I mean, I have a remote team that we meet virtually, and we're all over the country. And I know I think that's a pretty standard, or like becoming more common, that teams are virtual and meeting from all different locations and connecting up all over the country. So there's lots of ways to get connected to more people if you are interested.
Yeah, I see Haya, I hope I'm saying your name right, Haya. She has said for intensive training, they do want 3 people. So this is another like term that comes up in DBT. So there's foundational, there's all kinds of names. So there's foundational, there's intensive. Foundational and intensive generally are terms used by BTEC, not all of the time. And so Kathryn, jump in and tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that if somebody wanted to go in, if a group of people wanted to go in and from the ground up build a DBT program, then they might seek out an intensive training, because it's a 2-part training. And the first part is focused mostly on the model and how to do the therapy. And the second part is more about how to build the program and build your team together. And so she had said for intensive training, they want 3 people. That may be a requirement to attend a BTEC training, but they will also help you find those people if you don't have them. If you're looking into training options and you hear terms like foundational versus intensive or core, or for us, we're doing a starter pack training, the thing to consider is like, what are you looking for and what do you want to do? A 5-day, 40-hour training for most people is hitting the need of being able to do the work. So even if you're coming in, let's say you're in private practice, you don't have a team and you sign up for the starter pack training, this is generally, well, the way that we design this training is to be on the same level of a foundational style training. Foundational trainings were made because after doing so many intensives, there started to be more programs who didn't need a 10-day training. They didn't need to keep starting programs. They needed to take people into their program and shape them up to be able to join in and do the work that they were doing. So then they started inviting people to the first half of the training, which is only the 5-day part, and calling that a foundational. So the training that Kathryn and I are doing will hit that mark. So whether you are coming in as a part of an existing team, or you're coming in and you'd like to be able to join a team, but you don't have other people with you, you can still do that by coming to our training. We'll help get you connected to other people who want to be doing the same kind of thing. And that's not super challenging, like Kathryn said.
There's lots of options. There's a great community of therapists out there that are all interested in doing that same thing. So you're in good company.
Yes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our training. I see some names in here of people who are coming to our training, so that is super exciting. I am going to just share here. So we've mentioned a couple of things already. This training that's coming up, it's called the DBT Starter Pack. Why is it called the DBT Starter Pack? Because it's fun. Like, it's going to be in September. It's back to school season. You know, I go through Target and I'm just like, colored pencils, which I have no need for, but just the seeing them, it gets me very excited. And so in thinking about that and thinking about what does everyone need in order to become a DBT therapist, like what can we call this? We landed on the starter pack. So this is a 40-hour training. 32 hours of it is going to be taught live by myself and Kathryn. And let me tell you guys, we know everyone has been on Zoom for the last year and a half. We know you're tired, okay? So because of that, we broke it up into 3 chunks. So part 1 is starting soon. It's less than a month away. I think I checked this morning, there are 13 spots left. So it's filling up very quickly. It's going to run from 12 to 4:15 Eastern time. So if you're in California and you are worried that we are an East Coast time training, it's perfect time for you because it's going to start at 9 a.m. Someone asked the other day, they thought, oh, it's East Coast, it's going to be like 6 a.m. No, because it's only from 12 to 4:15, it's only 4-hour chunks each day. So number one, you're not dying of boredom at a computer. You're not going to shrink from being at the screen for 8 hours in a row. Like, who can really tolerate that after what we've been through in the last year? So we shortened it up. We also made it really accessible for anyone who wants to continue to see clients that day. You can likely see them in the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. And it's not causing too much of a disruption, hopefully, in anyone's schedule. So part 1 is going to be Monday through Thursday, 12 to 4:15. There's a 15-minute break in there. And then you'll have October off to go to do the things that you've learned, to come up with problems and questions for the next part of your training, to maybe watch some of the on-demand content that you have, which is all focused on skills groups. And then you'll come back for the second part that starts in November, same times, 12 to 4:15. There are 32 APA CEs approved and 32 New Jersey social work CEs approved as well. And you can sign up right here. For anyone who has 5 people or more signing up, you will get a discount. So that's something to consider as well. So if you haven't signed up already, if you're thinking about it, if you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know. We literally talk about this forever. Last night and the night before, I must have been thinking about this coming up. I have had dreams of DBT. Like, I was dreaming about teaching some skill or something. I won't share that story with you guys today, but yeah, it's just on our mind all of the time. We really love it. Kathryn and I, we've been doing it for years, and we're really excited to share it with everyone. I think something else that's really important and might be a little bit unique to Kathryn and I, because there's lots of great options for trainings. Like, there's tons of places out there who are offering really great trainings. And I think the difference for us is that you know, we've been doing DBT for a long time. We continue to see clients. We're both supervising clinicians in one way or another and training them to be as adherent as possible. Whether they decide to pursue certification or not, we want them to feel prepared at that level. So we can teach and speak to a lot of the common pitfalls that that folks can fall into when being newly trained in DBT. The other thing is that we're really excited and really open to ongoing feedback. So we plan to get feedback pretty regularly during it to make sure that everyone's questions and needs are being addressed during the training. And with it being a smaller training, we're going to be able to spend a lot more time on that stuff with you guys. Like, I think when I got trained, I don't know how many people are in there. This was way pre-COVID, but there's probably 100-something people in the room when I got trained. And so every time I wanted to ask the question, I would like really have to raise my hand in the back. So we have space for you guys. We've kept it limited in order to make sure that we can hit everything everyone needs. So I think that's that. Do you have anything to add about our fabulous training and how great we are? Anything else, Kathryn?
I do think it's going to be a lot of fun. I feel like there's a lot of exciting things that you can do online in terms of even just like having role plays. I've got a number of them pre-recorded that are really good ones to show. And I know that Shaelene and I will do some. And I've done a lot of online trainings in the last year that I think I'm getting better at how to do it. And I think it's been a lot of fun for those that have attended. So I hope that you'll all consider. I did want to attend to this question that came in the chat about the question says, so you can be foundationally trained and seek certification. However, you would not be considered intensively trained. And I just want to reiterate, Shaelene said this, but the terms foundational training and intensive training they refer specifically to the type of, or the name of specific trainings that are offered by Behavior Tech. And that's the training arm of Linehan's organization that sort of did all of the initial training of DBT years ago. And as Shaelene has said, there's lots of organizations now that do training. And so those terms, those would specifically apply, like some being intensively trained usually refers to someone who's been through that 10-day training through BTEC. And so I'm not sure if that totally answers your question. You don't need that 10-day level just to apply for certification. And I think I completed the 10-day years after I had done a foundational, and I was doing DBT for that period of time, and
I've never done a 10-day. I only did a foundational, and I own a big old DBT practice, and like I said, I'm certified in it. So I mean, the quick answer is no, you're not going to consider to be intensively trained. That shouldn't really matter though. Like, it's not as if you won't be able to do DBT or open up a center or do it privately. I think the question that's generally more asked for people who are in the field of DBT is like, who are your trainers and what kind of experience do they have? Who were they trained by? So somewhere in the lineage will land, people who were once at Behavior Tech, which was Linehan's company. And so since then, as DBT has become bigger and more widely accepted and sought after, those people who have gone on and they've created their own companies and they've created their own trainings. And Kathryn was kind of like dampening her wild success stories as a trainer. But Kathryn, you've trained with like some of the best people out there. And Kathryn has been a trainer for quite some time. And so again, like if anyone was asking, well, who did you get trained by? Are you foundationally trained? You would, if you came to our training, you would respond, I went to a 40-hour, 5-day training. It was called the DBT Starter Pack, and it was run by Shaelene and Kathryn. And then everyone will go, oh my God, they're amazing. But really, you would say they're Linehan certified, and then they would kind of know that, okay, these trainers know what they're doing. Obviously, we could speak more to that, but I think that's generally where the conversation goes and where it ends. Somebody asked about elaborating on formal mindfulness experience. They really are not super defined on that. They just want some sort of documentation saying you did something. So you can take an online course on mindfulness that pops out something at the end that says that you've completed, a day training, like there really isn't. I've written into the board and asked them specifically about this. They just want proof that you've done something formal. And I believe you just attest to the fact that you practice mindfulness on your own, but it's not defined further than that. So
yeah, I mean, I know people who've, through their own practice and their own, like if they have for some people who might be part of like a Zen tradition or something, and they've, been doing that long before they started DBT, that would be their formal training. And other people get more like clinical training in it. So attending even a workshop on mindfulness, which there are many available out there. And then, for other people, it's it could be in totally different traditions that have nothing to do with, more like meditative. I mean, I know Shaelene had said yoga. I know other people who've done their mindfulness has been through their religious practice, like a, contemplative prayer or something. So it's completely open. But I think that the spirit of it is that you have invested some of your time in learning more about mindfulness and applying it in your own life and practicing it in some way, and being able to attest to that through either, a certificate of a completion of some sort of course or workshop, or some other, invested time and energy in learning. So it's
pretty that part is pretty general and pretty open. There's not anything too specific on that. So
if people do have specific questions or want like ideas of places to go, I can tell you Cedar Coons, who wrote the book Mindfulness for Emotion Regulation, I think is what it's called.
I want to say it might be intense.
Is that wrong?
I always
intense emotions. That's what it is. Mindfulness for intense emotions. But Cedar Coons is she's been a long time BTEC trainer, and she started the DBT of Santa Fe, and she's a fantastic mindfulness teacher and leader. And she, I know, does, retreats usually once or twice a year that you can look into if you're interested. I would just go to her website. She's cedarcoons.com. she's a great resource if you're interested in looking for more specific training around mindfulness.
Okay, I think we got all of the questions. Unless anybody has any else, I'm just going to scan through and make sure we hit everything. Oh, here is the link. Hold on, I'm going to give everyone the link to the therapist wiki that Kathryn had referenced earlier.
And yeah, just to say the therapist wiki, this is just a site that we've collected. This was back when Practice Ground was a training organization. We don't offer trainings anymore online there, but they do. The wiki is still available. There's lots of resources like templates for diary cards if you're interested in those. There's some information about if you want to get started in observing your own sessions and coding those for adherence. That's why I had mentioned it before, the Ellen Frazzetti's coding form is available there. There's some different skills training resources. There's tons of stuff on there if you're just looking for extra resources for DBT therapists.
Yep, and then the last thing I'll put in here is the link for the starter pack training. Like I said, it starts in less than a month. Feel free to reach out to Kathryn or myself. Our contact information is up on the website as well. And I think that's it. I don't see any other questions. I think we've hit everything. Anything you think we're missing, Kathryn? Any final thought? This is the end of our free series. This is our summer series. It's been fun.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really glad that people have been attending. It's been really great to be able to go through all of these various topics this summer. I think especially, I just want to hit home that last point. The last webinar we did was about burnout, and now we're talking about certification. And in some ways, of course, as we've said, certification has its challenges along the way. But if you are looking for ways to sustain a really, pleasant career in DBT, I just want to say, like, taking the path of certification and going through the ringer has its challenges initially, but it really is a good way to establish, a deeper sense of what you're doing and more confidence. I mean, it's a really great path. So I highly recommend it for anyone who's interested and wants to have a nice, long, healthy, stable career in their work, and then join us for the training, because we'll have a lot of fun along the way.
One thing too, another question that has come up before is like, well, what if I'm not ready to offer all of it? What if I'm not ready to offer full or comprehensive DBT? The cool thing about going through training is that you will learn the varying degrees of how much to serve your guests when they're coming, to dinner at your house, right? So if you're hosting somebody who is coming over for dessert, you're not going to put out a salad and appetizers. You're just going to go right to dessert because they don't need that other stuff. And so when clients are coming in through your door, you're assessing them to decide, like, how much of this do they need? Do they need a 4-course meal, or do they just need dessert? And so for my clients who come in who don't need full DBT, they're still going to get some of it, because like Kathryn was saying, there's still going to be parts of it that are very helpful to them. And so just because you go through the training, it doesn't mean that you only have to do full DBT. It doesn't mean that you have to only see clients who are suicidal or anything like that. You're going to use this with any population that you have. You just may not serve them the whole 4-course meal. You may just say, okay, tonight we're working on mindfulness, or maybe you'll use commitment strategies with them. Maybe you're just giving them a part of it, but not the whole thing. And that's still totally fine. And DBT is one of those treatments that will not only help your clients at any place, but it'll help you a lot too. Like the really cool, one of the many cool things about DBT is like, we, as being genuine therapists in DBT, which is a huge part of the model, is to practice what you're preaching. And so for nothing else, it's kind of like in yoga teacher training, they say, well, you could go through this and you could be a teacher, but you can just go through it and do better yoga. Like if you go through the training and you decide that you don't want to do DBT at all, you'll still have that for yourself, and you can just use that for yourself, because that's the kind of therapy that it is. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We appreciate you guys all showing up and for all of your questions. And we hope to see you soon. Take care,
Thanks
everybody.
all. Bye-bye.
Bye.